Hello friends, today we will go through the various techniques for improving the earthquake resistance of a small building. So in our country like Nepal, where there are a lot of chances of earthquake, isn't it? Nepal is the earthquake prone country, and living in such a country, it is very much essential for us to improve the earthquake resistant characteristics of the small building. So we must have to know that earthquake doesn't kill the human beings. So the structures that we are making, that is increasing the chances of killing or taking the life of the human beings as well as the properties. Okay, so we need to consider various earthquake resistance improving techniques of buildings, isn't it? So it is not necessary for us to say that we need sophisticated equipments, whole lot of things for increasing the earthquake resistance of a building. The locally available materials that are available within the locality can also be utilized properly with adequate workmanship and with proper construction technique and in accordance with the building laws. Then we can improve the earthquake resistance of the building. So we will consider various factors that we can adopt in our construction technique so as to improve the earthquake resistance of building. So we are considered here only the small building earthquake resistance. So for the earthquake resistance of the large buildings, you need to take whole lot of things, other considerations. So the first factor that we need to consider is the site selection. Okay. Similarly, we need to consider the building planning. So if we make a good building planning, then it would be very vital for resisting the earthquake characteristics. Likewise, we need to adopt a good foundations, isn't it? As foundation is the heart of the building. So if foundation is of adequate strength, then there is whole lot of chances that you can have earthquake resistant buildings. Likewise, you need to work on proper masonry works. The masonry adapted should be done with the proper construction technique, proper materials, with the proper joints, proper bed joints. So you need to work on the masonry works. Likewise, the doors and window openings should be provided and there should be adequate, sufficient openings. So if the openings is very large, then it would be very much vulnerable to the earthquake. So you need to consider the openings of doors and windows carefully. Likewise, the roofs sections should be made of adequate thickness so as to hold the different types of load coming in the structures. Similarly, the chhajjas that are placed in the building shall be considered. Likewise, the parapet wall should be considered or built in a proper manner. Along with that, the concrete and mortar works shall be made with adequate ratios, and the specifications that is required for the construction of certain structures shall be done as according to the specifications. Likewise, in small buildings, the location of the bands shall be in proper amount and proper number, and the various bands like lintel band, gravel band, etc. These should be provided in your house so that it can resist the lateral forces as well. Likewise, if it is necessary that a small building can be increase its earthquake resistant properties by retrofitting, then you can also do the retrofitting technique as well. So these are the factors that you need to consider in improving the earthquake resistance of the small buildings. So the first thing we need to consider for improving the earthquake resistance of a small building is to select the site properly. Okay, the building construction should be avoided on unstable embankments. Likewise, the sloping ground with columns of different height shall also be avoided. Similarly, the building construction should be avoided on the flood affected area. Likewise, the subsoil with marked discontinuity like rock in the some portion and soil in the some portion. So these are the things we need to consider while selecting the site. So we need to look upon whether your site is adequate or not, and according to that you need to proceed. Okay. The second thing we need to consider is the building planning. So we need to consider the plan of the building. So how can we make effective plan in the certain area of the site? So we need to plan well. So symmetric plans are safer as compared to asymmetrical plans. So we must go for square or rectangular plans rather than L-shaped building or E-shaped or S-shaped or T-shaped. Rectangular plans should not have length more than twice the width. So these are the things we need to consider while planning buildings. We need to consider our plot area, and we need to make a symmetrical plans as far as possible, and we need to avoid L-shape, E-shape, S-shape, T-shape buildings, as they are asymmetrical buildings and they cause distortion or they cause more effect while earthquake. Likewise, we need to consider the foundations, isn't it? So foundations should be adequate, and these foundations, the width of the foundations should not be less than 750 mm for a single story building and not less than 900 mm for multi-story buildings. Likewise, for more than one story you need to have a foundation more than 900 mm. Okay. Similarly, the depth of the foundation should not be less than 1 meter for subsoil and 0.45 meter for the rocky ground. Furthermore, before foundation is laid, we should remove all the loose materials including water from the trench and compact the bottom. After foundation is being laid off, the backfill should be done properly in the foundation and should be compacted properly. So these things we need to consider while for improving the earthquake resistance of the small building. Okay. Similarly, we need to consider other things as well. Like we need to consider masonry structures. So in case of masonry, stone masonry, each plain stone flat on its bordest face. That is, place each stone flat on the bordest face and we should place the length of the stone into the thickness of the wall to ensure interlocking inside and outside face of the wall. Furthermore, the voids using small chips of the stone with minimum possible mortar shall be filled off and break the stone to make it angular so that it has no rounded face. And at every 600 to 750 mm distance we need to use the through stones. Okay. While in case of brick masonry, we need to use properly bond bricks of adequate strength, and we need to place brick with its groove face marking up to ensure the better bond with the next course. For the concrete blocks, the rough faces should be placed towards the top and bottom to get good bond. The concrete blocks should be strong enough, and we need to brush the top and bottom face before laying. So these things we need to consider, isn't it? Next thing we need to consider is door and window opening, and walls with too many doors and windows close to each other collapse early. So windows should be kept at the same level. The total width of the openings in walls should not exceed 1/3 of the length of the wall. So this is the very important point I mentioned here. The total width of all openings in the walls should not exceed 1/3 of the length of the wall. So if your length is L, then the length of the opening should not be exceeding 0.33 L. So this is the basic thing that you have to remember. Doors should not be placed at the end of the wall, and they should be at least 500 mm from the cross walls. Clear width between two openings shall not be less than 600 mm. Okay, so these things you need to consider. For the roof, in sloping roofs with span greater than 6 meters, we need to use trusses instead of rafters. And if you have building with 4-sided sloping roofs, then it is a good practice than the 2-sided sloping roofs, since gable walls collapse early. Okay, the other thing we need to consider is chhajja, and the chhajja projections or balcony projections should be restricted to 0.9 meters. So as much, if we have a longer projection, then it will create a lot of bending moment, so the projection shall not be enough than 0.9 meters. And for larger projection, we need to use beams and the columns. Similarly, we need to consider parapet. Masonry parapet wall can collapse easily, so it is better to build a parapet with bricks up to 300 mm followed by the iron railings. Okay, the other thing is to consider is the concrete and the mortar characteristics. So we need to use river sand for making mortar and concrete, and it should be sieved to remove pebbles. Silt should be removed by holding it against wind. Coarse aggregates of size more than 30 mm should not be used. Aggregates should be well graded and angular before adding water. Cement and aggregates should be dry and mixed thoroughly. The other thing we need to consider is the band. So the following band should be provided at plinth level, lintel level, roof level. Okay, so we need to provide bands like plinth band, lintel band, roof band, gable band. For making RC reinforced concrete bands, minimum thickness is 75 mm and at least 2 bars of 8 mm diameters are required. They should be tied with steel lips of 6 mm diameter at 150 mm spacing. If wall size is larger, then diagonal and vertical bands may also be provided. And if we have certain cracks or certain structural discrepancies, then we can also retrofit this structure. So this retrofitting is the preparing a structure in a scientific manner so that the elements of the building act as an integral unit. So if we have certain defects in a small building, we can just eject out that structure and we can retrofit using various techniques, like we can just inject an extra layer of column, or extra we need to layer of bands, so we can just do retrofitting as well.